Well, she is the first lady of the state's capital, home to the Rattlers and Seminoles. Tallahassee, it's where R.J. Howard met Andrew Gillum.
Now, both were members of the Student Government Association at Florida A&M. She would go on to earn a biology degree and a Master of Public Health, while he would take his political career far beyond FAMU.
Tonight, Keitha Nelson sits down with R.J. Gillum, who hopes to become the next First Lady of Florida.
It might be overwhelming because I think he feels like there's a lot on his shoulders. There's a lot at stake.
For R.J. Gillum, the roles she and her husband aim to fill as leaders of the state go far beyond the realms of politics.
We're carrying a lot of hopes and dreams for a lot of other folks. And we just want to do right by them, you know, as much as we can.
R.J., a working mother of 3, has learned to juggle life on the campaign trail, stumping for her husband of 9 years. Overwhelmed herself at times, realizing the impact of his aim to make history.
I look out into the audience and it's so diverse, you know, all races, all ages, and there were multiple people in tears as he's speaking, and that was a sobering moment for me. You know, I teased him afterwards. I said it was like being at a Michael Jackson concert, and then he laughed.
Remaining jovial through adversity, she says, has pulled them through some painful times.
After going through years of tests, no one could tell us why we weren't able to have children, which is, it's very unsettling.
It's an issue not often spoke about publicly, but R.J. wants to change that. Struggling with fertility for 4 years before they were finally able to have their twins, Caroline and Jackson, through in vitro fertilization.
Something like this really tests your faith. We were able to get pregnant and experience 4 miscarriages, 3 in 1 year. So that was a really, really tough experience.
Her youngest, Davis, she says seemingly came along years later with ease. She keeps them in mind when making all decisions, including one that has already changed their lives.
We did have some conversations about, well, what do you think about governor? And I was pregnant at the time. We just found that out. So it was a fun conversation. I appreciated that he asked me, but I also knew that it wasn't really a question for me to say no to. I think that Andrew's destined to do what he's doing, and I would have never forgiven myself if I stood in the way of that.
Raised in Montgomery, Alabama, her mom a union organizer, R.J. learned early on the value of perseverance.
The interesting thing about going through the primary was that no one else, you know, besides our supporters, of course, thought the outcome was going to be what it was, but we always did.
A win that led to life in the fast lane.
And when you get a phone call from President Bill Clinton and Secretary Hillary Clinton to your cell phone saying, we've been watching the race, we just want to congratulate you, you know, and he gets off the phone and we both go, oh my God.
Former President Obama would later make a similar call to Gillum, pledging his support.
But I know he values a call from President Clinton the same as this little boy that has walked up to him wearing an Andrew Gillum t-shirt and being so excited. It's that same level of not wanting to let either of these people down, maybe even more so, you know, the little boy.
At home, the couple has 2 boys and a daddy's girl.
Does he do dishes? I mean,
oh yes,
diapers?
yes. Oh my goodness. I taught him early on how to do Caroline's hair, and she prefers that. If he's home, she'll say, I want daddy to do it. I think everyone else sees what I see. It's time for something different. And that politics has kind of drawn us all to our corners, and we know that we've got to kind of come together if we want to see some things change.
That was Keitha Nelson with that interview, and R.J. runs the Foundation for Florida Dental Association. She says 2 of her biggest passions are what she considers unmet health needs. That's dental and mental. That will be her platform as First Lady of the state. Our one-on-one with Casey DeSantis aired last night at 11. If you missed it or if you would like to see it again, it's online right now at firstcoastnews.com and also on our Facebook page.